cosmos for sleep stories. Tonight we travel out past Neptune, across the Kuiper Belt by Pluto, out to the place where the sun finally lets go, and on toward the Oort cloud. 3 machines are out there ahead of us tonight. Settle in and let your eyes close whenever they are ready. The journey carries on without them. Neptune is the last planet, and it is not the edge of anything. It sits 30 times further from the sun than this room does. 4.5 billion kilometers. It is the outermost thing on almost every drawing of the solar system anybody has ever made. And every one of those drawings stops there, because the page runs out, not because the solar system does. Past Neptune, the map keeps going, and it keeps going for a very long time. Further out still, and unseen, there is the Oort cloud. Nobody has ever seen it. Its far edge is thought to lie something like 100,000 times our own distance from the sun, which is a light year and a half. Laid out along a meter stick, with the sun at one end, and that far edge at the other, every planet in the solar system would sit inside the first third of a millimeter. It is simply a large, slow, mostly empty place, and it has been exactly this size the whole time anybody has been looking at it. Nothing out there is quick either. Neptune itself took a spacecraft 12 years to reach. Pluto took 9.5. The place where the sun lets go took 35 years from launch. The Oort cloud, at the fastest speed anything human has ever been given, is a journey of centuries. And there are 3 machines out there tonight. 2 of them left in 1977, 16 days apart, and have been traveling ever since. The 3rd left in 2006, went past Pluto on the way, and is still going. All 3 are beyond Neptune now. None of them is coming back, and none of them was ever meant to. Start at the near edge, just outside Neptune's orbit. The Kuiper Belt begins where Neptune's orbit ends. It is a ring flat wide, tilted only slightly, running from about 30 times our distance from the sun out to about 50. In the middle of that span is thickest. At the outer edge, it thins away without any clear line, over a stretch wider than everything inside it. Several thousand of its objects have been found and catalogued so far. The estimate for how many are out there larger than 100 kilometers across runs into the hundreds of thousands. And it is still, by any ordinary use of the word, empty. Everything in the belt put together comes to a small fraction of the material in this one planet. The objects are typically millions of kilometers apart. A spacecraft crossing the belt goes for months without anything close enough to see, and nothing has ever come close to anything out there by accident. The larger ones have names. Eris is out there, almost exactly Pluto's width, and rather heavier, currently 95 times our own distance from the Sun. Makemake and Haumea are further in, both well short of Pluto's size, both bright with ice. Quaoar is smaller again and has a ring around it, sitting further out from it than anybody expected a ring to sit. All of them take a very long time to go around. 280 years for one, 300 for another, 560 for Eris on its stretched and tilted path. Not one of them has finished a single lap in the time anybody has known it was there, and most of them will not finish one for centuries yet. Out in the belt, the Sun is a very bright star and nothing more. Sunlight there is around 1,000th of what falls on this window. The surfaces sit near 230 degrees below zero, which is cold enough that water is a rock, and nitrogen and methane are frost lying on top of it. One of the belt's objects is not in the belt anymore. Neptune's large moon goes around the planet backwards, which is not how a moon formed in place would behave. The straightforward reading is that it was made out here, drifted inward, and was caught. If that is right, then a Kuiper Belt object was photographed close up in 1989, 3 years before anybody found the first one and knew there was a belt at all. The belt lies in roughly the same flat plane the planets do. All 3 3 of tonight's machines crossed its full width, one after another, over several years each. None of them was ever in the slightest danger from it. There is simply too much room. Somewhere past 50 times our distance, the belt gives out. What lies beyond is a thinner scattering of objects on much longer and much more tilted orbits. The same kind of material spread across a far larger volume, with nothing to mark where one region ends and the next begins. It becomes emptier gradually, the way a town becomes countryside. And a little further out than that, the catalog simply runs out of entries. Pluto sits about 40 times our own distance from the Sun, on average. It takes 248 years to go around once. It was found in 1930, so in the whole time anybody has known it is there, it has covered rather less than half of one lap. Its orbit is tilted and stretched. For 20 years out of every 248, it comes inside Neptune's path and is temporarily not the further of the two. The last time was between 1979 and 1999. Nobody had ever seen it as anything but a dot until 11 years ago. The spacecraft that changed that left in January of 2006 and arrived in July of 2015. 9.5 years at the fastest departure speed anything has ever been given. It did not stop. It went past at about 14 kilometers a second, 12,500 kilometers above the surface, taking pictures for a single afternoon. Everything anybody knows about what Pluto actually looks like was gathered in that one pass. It is not the bare gray rock everybody had drawn. There is a plain of frozen nitrogen on it, 1,000 kilometers across, smooth, pale, and without a single crater anywhere on it. At its edge stand mountains 3.5 kilometers high, made of water ice. The surface is 229 degrees below zero. There is an atmosphere, and it is very thin, about 100,000th of the pressure in this room. On the way out, the pictures showed that atmosphere lit from behind in around 20 separate blue layers, stacked one above another all the way around the edge of the world. And there is Charon. Charon is half Pluto's width and sits about 20,000 kilometers away, which is close. The two of them turn together, facing each other permanently. From the side of Pluto that faces it, Charon hangs in one place in the sky and never moves, all the way through the 6.5 days it takes either of them to turn. From the other side of Pluto, it is never visible at all. The light out there is not quite what people expect. Noon on Pluto is about as bright as this room 10 minutes after sunset. Dim, but nowhere near dark. You could read a page by it, and it is hundreds of times brighter than a full moon on a clear night here. The sun is a point, too small to show a shape, and it is still the only thing in that sky worth calling bright. The astronomer who found Pluto in 1930 died in the 1990s. A small container of his ashes was fixed inside the spacecraft before launch, with a short inscription on it, and it went past Pluto in July of 2015, along with everything else on board. At the time of that pass, a message each way took about 4.5 hours. After Pluto, the spacecraft kept going, and there was fuel enough to aim it at one more thing. The one thing had to be almost exactly ahead. A suitable object was found by a telescope in orbit in 2014 as a faint point among crowded stars, and for years afterwards it had no name. It was reached on the 1st of January 2019 at 43 times our distance from the sun. The closest approach was 3,500 kilometers. It is still the most distant thing anybody has ever flown past. What was there measured? About 35 kilometers from end to end. 2 rounded lobes, one larger than the other, resting against each other and joined at a narrow neck, as though 2 separate objects had drifted together at walking pace a very long time ago and simply stayed. The surface is a deep red. There are almost no craters on it. It is one of the least disturbed objects anybody has ever looked at closely. After that, there was nothing more within reach to visit. The spacecraft is 65 times our own distance from the sun tonight, still working, still moving outward at about 13.5 kilometers a second. A message to it takes about 9 hours. It has fuel enough to keep its dish pointed for years, yet its instruments are still returning readings from a part of the outer system nothing else has ever measured from the inside, and it will cross the boundary somewhere in the next decade or two. Nobody can say yet which year that will be, and there is no particular need to know in advance. There are other large things out at that range that nothing has ever visited. Eris is 95 times our distance from the sun. Gong Gong is 90. Sedna is nearer than either of them at the moment, at about 83. And Sedna is on the strangest orbit anybody has measured. Sedna takes 11,400 years to go around once. At its furthest, it is about 900 times our own distance from the sun. It is approaching its closest point now, and will pass it around the year 2076, and then spend the following 5,500 years going back out again. That one lap fits into the age of the solar system something like 400,000 times, and nothing has disturbed it in all the time anybody has watched. There may be more like it, further out and fainter. There may also be something larger, much further out, which would account for the way a handful of those very long orbits are grouped around the same part of the sky. Nobody has found any such thing, and it may not be there at all. It has been an open question, quietly, for about 20 years, and nothing depends on the answer. Past Sedna, the catalogue thins to nothing. Between the outer belt and the boundary, there is a stretch some 70 times our distance from the sun across. And across the whole of it, only a scattering of objects has ever been found. It is the emptiest measured region there is, and the two oldest machines out there spent much of their working lives crossing it between the Kuiper Belt and the edge of the sun's reach. there is a very long stretch of nothing much. It runs from about 50 times our distance from the sun out to about 120. In plain distance, that is more than twice the width of everything inside it, planets and belt together, and there is nothing in it to look at. The two machines from 1977 spent the better part of 25 years each crossing it. They did one thing on the way. On the 14th of February, 1990, the first of them was turned around, 40 times our distance out, and asked to photograph the place it had come from. It took 60 frames. 6 planets appeared in them as points at various brightnesses. In one frame, the Earth is a single pale speck less than a pixel wide, sitting in a band of scattered sunlight that happened to fall across the lens. That was the last thing the cameras ever did. They were switched off afterwards, having done everything they were built for, and the heaters that kept them warm were switched off with them. No picture like it has been taken from that distance since, and none is going to be for a long while yet. The rest of that stretch passed without an event of any kind. Whole careers began and ended on the ground, while the two of them covered it. The people who built them handed the work on twice over, and the craft carried on at nearly the same speed the entire time. The sun from out there is no longer a disk. At 40 times our distance, it is a point. By an enormous margin, the brightest thing in the sky, bright enough to cast a shadow, and still a point, no different in shape from the stars around it. There is one event in that whole stretch, and it is invisible. At somewhere around 90 times our distance, the material streaming outward from the sun slows down rather abruptly. The first machine passed through that slowing in December of 2004 at 94 times our distance. The second passed through it in August of 2007 at 84. Nothing about it could be seen. No light, no shape, nothing that a camera would have registered. After that, both of them were in the outer part of the sun's own region, with another long stretch to go. They had been traveling for 27 years and 30 years respectively by then. And they had another 8 and another 11 years to run before the boundary. There is a boundary out there, and both of the old machines have crossed it. The first crossed on the 25th of August, 2012, at 121 times our own distance from the Sun. The second crossed on the 5th of November, 2018, at 119. 6 years apart, in 2 quite different directions, and the boundary was in almost exactly the same place both times. The edge is roughly round. It is roughly where it had been thought to be, and it is a real place rather than a line on a diagram. On the far side of it, the material between the stars begins. Inside the boundary, everything a spacecraft passes through has come off the Sun. Outside it, that material has not. Neither craft noticed at the time. There was no jolt and no line, nothing that read as an event while it was happening. It is also not the edge of the Sun's influence, only the edge of its material. The Sun still holds everything out there by gravity, and that reach runs on for hundreds of times further than the boundary does. Every object in the Oort cloud, a light year out and more, is going around the Sun and always has been. A thing can be in interstellar space and in orbit around the Sun at the same time, and both of those are true of both machines tonight. The region they are in now is not quite empty. It is a mild patch of gas, about 30 light years across, and both machines are well inside it, which leaves the plain question of where they are. The first is about 170 times our own distance from the Sun. The second is about 144. Both are still reporting in 49 years after launch on transmitters of a couple of dozen watts into dish antennas 70 meters across. A message to the first one takes not quite a full day to arrive. To the second, about 20 hours. In November of 2026, that first number crosses a whole day. On the 18th of November, the distance between here and that spacecraft becomes exactly one light day. The distance light covers in 24 hours. Nothing built by anybody has ever been that far from here before. There is nothing to do about it and nothing to watch. The number simply passes, the way a milestone passes on a road nobody happens to be driving down. And the craft goes on at 17 kilometers a second, exactly as it was doing the day before. The two of them left in the same fortnight of 1977, 16 days apart. The earlier one went up on the 20th of August. The later one went on the 5th of September on a faster path and overtook it inside 4 months. It has been ahead ever since, and it is ahead by about 28 times our distance from the sun tonight. They took different routes past the planets. Both went by Jupiter in 1979 and Saturn in 1980 and 1981. Then the first passed close under Titan and came up out of the flat plane the planets sit in. The second stayed in the plane, went on to Uranus in 1986, and Neptune in 1989, and was bent downward on its way past. So they are not traveling together. One is climbing north out of the disk of the solar system, and the other is heading south below it. And they have been drawing apart quietly since the 1980s. The gap between them is now most of the way from here out to Pluto. Each of them carries a record on the outside. It is a gold-plated disc about the size of a dinner plate, bolted to the hull, with 115 pictures stored on it, and a set of engraved instructions on the cover for anybody who ever finds it and wonders what it is for. Nobody involved expected it to be found. They are not the only ones out there. 2 older machines left ahead of them, both launched in the early 1970s, both quiet for decades now, one since 1995 and one since 2003. Both are still traveling on courses that will not change. One is about 140 times our distance from the sun tonight, and the other about 118. Nothing will hear from either of them again, and nothing needs to. The ends of these journeys are known, roughly, in something like 38,000 years. The first of the two, from 1977, will pass a small star in the Little Bear at a range of under 2 light years. In about 40,000 years, the second will pass a small star in Andromeda at a similar range. Neither is aiming at anything. Those are simply the stars they happen to go near. 49 years of traveling to reach 170 times our distance from the sun. And that is the fast one, on the fastest route anybody has ever managed, still with the whole of the Oort cloud in front of it. The last thing out there is the Oort cloud, and nobody has ever seen any part of it in place. It is thought to begin somewhere around 1,000 times our own distance from the sun, and to run outward to something like 100,000 times. That outer figure is a light year and a half, and the nearest other star is a little over 4 light years away. So the far edge of this system is better than 1/3 of the way there. It is not a ring and not a disk. It is a shell, all the way around, in every direction at once, above the plane of the planets, below it, and out past both poles of the sun. Everything nearer than it lies flat. This one thing does not. The evidence for it is entirely indirect. Long period comets arrive from every part of the sky on paths that take tens of thousands of years to complete, and the geometry of those paths puts their far ends out at that range. The spacecraft that has gone furthest, moving at 17 kilometers a second, needs about 300 years to reach the inner edge of the cloud. To pass out the far side of it, it needs about 30,000 more. 300 years, at the fastest speed anything has ever left here. Nothing launched so far is going to arrive, and nothing being planned will either. And none of that matters to anything out there. Those objects have been on their orbits for 4.5 billion years. They will be on the same orbits, in the same places, whenever anything eventually arrives. Out at that range, the sun is a star among stars. It would still still be the brightest one in that sky by a wide margin, brighter than any star visible from a garden here, but a star, not a source of daylight, and not warm at all. Whatever is out there sits in starlight, at a few degrees above the coldest temperature there is. And the objects are far apart, past any comparison that helps. Something like tens of millions of kilometers between one and the next, in a shell that is mostly empty, going around the sun once every few million years. Neptune tonight, 4.5 billion kilometers out. The wide flat belt beyond it. Pluto in the middle of that belt, with its one big moon standing motionless overhead. Two old machines past the boundary now, going quietly north and south out of the plain. A third crossing the empty part behind them at 13.5 kilometers a second. And past all of it, unseen, the long, slow shell turning once every few million years. None of it needs anything from anybody. It is all exactly where it has always been, and there is nothing more that needs to happen tonight. Nothing out there is hurrying. The two old machines are still going outward, the way they have been going outward for most of a lifetime. They are further out tonight than they were this morning. The third is somewhere behind them, crossing the same emptiness at its own steady pace. Nothing is waiting for any of them, and nothing needs them to arrive. There is nothing left to follow. Only the distances and the dark between them. Sleep well